Ben Monroe hadn't even unpacked all the boxes in his garage when a yellow envelope appeared wedged under his windshield wiper. At first glance, it looked like a welcome letter. Maple Hollow was known for its well-kept lawns, neighborly wave routines, and pastel mailboxes. But when Ben opened the envelope, the tone was anything but friendly. It was a formal violation notice. Something about unauthorized exterior modifications. Ben read it twice. He hadn't even changed a bulb on the porch light yet. The only thing he'd done was hang a simple welcome sign on their door, a handwritten line at the bottom, under the official header, made his eyebrow twitch. Please correct immediately or fines will be applied. KP Alyssa, his wife, laughed it off when he brought it inside. Welcome to HOA land, she said, unrolling a rug in the living room. Let's just keep a low profile. We're the new folks, remember? Ben tried, but the next morning, another envelope showed up. This time, it claimed he had an improper garbage can placement even though they hadn't even set one out yet. Something didn't add up, so, that evening, he walked the street. Most of the neighbors were polite, but tight-lipped. A few hinted that their HOA president, Karen Prescott, had her own way of doing things. She likes control, one man muttered, barely making eye contact. If you question her, the violations get real creative, real fast. By the third envelope, Ben wasn't amused. He checked the HOA handbook front to back. Nothing he had done broke any rules. Alyssa suggested setting up their smart doorbell camera. Just in case, maybe someone's messing with us, she said, half joking. But even she didn't believe her own theory. That weekend, Ben decided to do a quiet stakeout from the upstairs window, just to prove he was overthinking it. The street stayed quiet. Nothing moved for hours except the occasional squirrel. But at exactly 2:37 a.m., the porch light flickered on. Karen. She wasn't just walking by. She was crouched at their front door, fiddling with something. Ben strained, his eyes hard thumping. It looked like keys, multiple keys. He started down the stairs, but by the time he got outside, she was gone. No knock, no explanation. Just an envelope lying flat on the welcome mat. This one accused them of leaving hazardous garden items in public view. They didn't even have a garden yet. Ben and Alyssa filed a complaint with the HOA. The board responded with a generic email stating that Karen, as president, had emergency access for inspections. Standard policy, it said. But that didn't explain the time of night or why she was letting herself in. Ben reviewed the doorbell footage the next morning. It clearly showed Karen holding a ring of keys and glancing over her shoulder. Before inserting one into their front lock, she hesitated at the threshold, then pushed the door slightly open. She didn't step in, but she didn't need to. That moment alone raised every alarm bell in Ben's head. Alyssa was already on the phone with her Uncle Marcus. By the time Ben came into the kitchen, Marcus, a career detective in the county sheriff's department, listened calmly before asking one question. Do you have anything on her legally? Ben hesitated. Not yet. Then let's change that. Over the next few days, they worked quietly. Marcus helped them set up a new layer of motion alerts and a silent audio recording sensor just inside the entryway. They told no one. Alyssa even spread a rumor at the next community potluck that they were leaving town for a weekend spa retreat. Karen overheard, and that was the idea. If you think Karen's done pushing limits, keep watching because what she does next crosses the line so hard, it comes with a badge and backup. Friday morning came without fanfare. The sky hung low with overcast clouds, casting a dull gray light over Maple Hollow. The kind of morning where everything feels quiet, but not calm. Then Monroe paced near the living room window, pretending to scroll his phone. But his eyes were on the sidewalk. Alyssa stood in the hallway, keys in one hand, duffel bag in the other, heaping up appearances for anyone watching. They weren't actually leaving town. That was the whole point. Alyssa stepped out first, locking the front door. Behind her, the bags were decoys. Inside, everything that mattered stayed right where it was, along with two hidden audio recorders, a motion sensor camera just beyond the threshold, and a fresh bolt lock installed above the one Karen had a copy for. As the couple pulled out of the driveway, then tapped twice on the steering wheel. That was the signal. Behind the curtains, Detective Marcus Wade, Alyssa's uncle, quietly moved from the kitchen into the front parlor. Crouched low, he wasn't alone. With him were officers, Rachel Soto and Cameron Lee, both off-duty, licensed to intervene. They had been briefed. Karen wasn't to be touched unless she crossed the doorway. If she did, everything changed. Marcus adjusted the McClip beneath his flannel shirt. "We sit tight," he whispered. "She'll come when she thinks no one's watching." Meanwhile, across the cul-de-sac, Karen Prescott sat stiffly at her dining room table, laptop open, sipping lukewarm tea. She stared at the Community Watch app, a live feed of neighborhood activity. Ben and Alyssa's car had just driven out of the gate. Karen clicked a tab titled Compliance Visits. She scrolled past several names, stopping at the Monroes. Small note in red, multiple infractions, suspected fire hazard, monitor interior. She leaned back, then reached into her drawer and removed a thin silver key ring. It held two brass keys and one newer, black plastic one. She picked the brass one with a small blue sticker. "Time for a friendly check-in," she murmured, smiling faintly. Back inside the Monroe house, the tension was stifling. Marcus checked his phone for the fifth time. Officer Soto stretched her neck, whispering, "You sure she's coming today?" "She'll come," Marcus said. "Karen likes control. That doesn't go on vacation." At exactly 2:41 p.m., the doorbell camera blinked. Motion detected. On the monitor in the kitchen, Karen's figure appeared. She was in full horror mode, pressed khakis, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched perfectly in her hair. She stood on the porch for nearly a minute, tapping something into her phone. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the key. "She's doing it," whispered Officer Lee. Karen inserted the key into the lower lock. It turned easily. She pushed the door gently, but it stopped against the new bolt installed higher up. Her brows furrowed. She stepped back, glancing side to side, then reached into her tote bag and pulled out a bump key. Marcus nearly laughed. She came prepared. Karen slid the tool into the top lock and gave it a practiced twist. It didn't open. She frowned deeper, jiggled it again, and then, abandoning the lock, placed her ear to the door for several seconds. Apparently satisfied, she turned the knob and leaned into the door. This time, the top bolt gave way with a sharp click. The door opened. She stepped inside. "Welcome to felony territory," Marcus muttered. Karen took two full steps over the threshold. Before she froze, two men and one woman stood motionless in the living room, hands folded in front of them. All wore plain clothes, but their posture was unmistakable. Karen blinked, her lips parted, then closed. "Ma'am," Officer Soto said calmly, "you've just entered a private residence without permission. Please step back and place your keys on the table." Karen's mouth twitched. I'm authorized. HOA protocol allows wellness checks for suspected safety violations." Marcus stepped forward. "I checked your bylaws. It doesn't." She clutched the clipboard like a shield. "You people set me up. We didn't need to," Marcus said. "You walked right in." Karen's eyes darted toward the door, but She didn't run. Instead, she slowly removed the key from the knob and placed it on the table. Marcus reached into his pocket and pressed a button on his phone. "Just so you know," he said, "this whole thing's been recorded." Karen's face turned pale, and just like that, the rules of the neighborhood began to shift. The front door clicked shut behind Karen with a finality that echoed louder than it should have. She didn't speak another word. The officers didn't cuff her, not yet. But they took down every detail, asked every question, and escorted her back outside like she was radioactive. Ben and Alyssa, still parked just a few streets away, had been monitoring the footage through their phone. The second Karen crossed the threshold, Ben gripped the steering wheel like he was trying not to yell. Alyssa stayed still, eyes locked on the screen as Karen's figure shrank into the background. "She actually did it," Alyssa whispered. Ben shook his head. "She really thinks she's untouchable." They didn't go home right away. Marcus had advised they wait until the officers cleared the scene. He didn't want the confrontation turning into something worse. Karen had a reputation for being composed in public. But behind the scenes, she played a different game, one with power moves and secret rule changes. By evening, news of the incident had already started spreading. But not the full story. The HOA Facebook page exploded with a vague, frantic post from Karen herself. HOA presidents are constantly under scrutiny, especially when performing their duties for the safety of this community. Today, during a routine wellness inspection, I was ambushed in a resident's home and humiliated. I will not tolerate false accusations. Comments flooded in. Some called her brave. Others questioned why she had a key at all. One person simply asked, "Since when does checking for wellness involve entering someone's home without notice?" Karen ignored those. Back at the Monroe house, Marcus and the officers went over every piece of recorded evidence. Clear video, footage, clear audio. Karen unlocking the door, her statements, her body language, the startled silence when she saw them inside. It wasn't just a bad look, it was a violation. Marcus was already drafting a formal incident report for the sheriff's department. The Monroes had the option to press charges, though he advised patience. "You want this to be airtight," Marcus said. "Let her try to lie, then we bring the proof." Ben nodded, frustrated but calm. "How long do we wait?" "Not long," Marcus promised. "She'll make the first move." He was right. The next morning, the Monroes received an email from the HOA board. Subject line: urgent review of homeowner conduct. It wasn't about Karen. It was about them. The email accused Ben and Alyssa of entrapment, harassment of HOA officials, and unauthorized recording of private inspections. It claimed Karen had entered under a clause from the HOA Charter Section 1(b) allowing visual compliance checks during suspected emergencies. Ben stared at the screen in disbelief. They're siding with her? Alyssa grabbed the printed copy of the charter they'd received during move-in. She flipped pages, searching furiously. "There's number 1(b), she said. "This isn't even in here." Ben picked up the phone and called Marcus. The detective chuckled dryly. "She's rewriting the rule book on the fly. Desperate move." Alyssa didn't laugh. "She's going to smear us now, isn't she?" "She already is," Marcus said. "But here's what she doesn't know: we have more than just doorbell footage." Officer Soto had pulled the logs from the camera inside. The audio was crisp. Karen had whispered to herself while unlocking the door, "They won't even know I came in. Just a quick peek." That sentence alone changed everything. Marcus filed a secondary report with the sheriff's department and attached the recording. Now it wasn't just suspicion, it was premeditation. Meanwhile, Ben reached out to 3 other residents who had hinted at similar incidents. One of them, a retired teacher named Carla, admitted Karen had once entered her garage under the excuse of checking for chemical storage. I didn't say anything because she made me feel like I was wrong for being upset, Carla said. But I knew it was weird. Ben encouraged her to speak with the board, but Carla hesitated. They all owe her favors. She helped half of them get elected. Marcus, listening from the next room, quietly said, "Then we don't go to the board, we go to the people." That night, Ben uploaded the unedited doorbell cam footage to a private video link. No captions, no edits, no commentary, just the raw truth. Then he sent it anonymously to every homeowner in Maple Hollow. And that was when things really started to crack up. By Sunday morning, the air in Maple Hollow felt heavier, like the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. Most residents didn't speak openly about what happened at the Monroe house, but doorbells had been ringing more than usual. Quiet knocks, sharp whispers, screenshots passed from phone to phone. The anonymous video had made its rounds. Karen's face, frozen in disbelief as she stepped inside Ben and Alyssa's home, had now been watched by half the community. Still, Karen showed no signs of slowing down. She sat tall in her office chair at the HOA clubhouse, clicking through her laptop like nothing had happened. Her latest message to the community was carefully crafted and scheduled to go live at 10 o'clock a.m. sharp. She called it a security reminder. It didn't mention the Monroes by name, but referred vaguely to residents conducting illegal surveillance and setting up traps that put the entire community at risk. At 10:03 a.m., the post went live. At 10:05 a.m., the HOA page crashed from too many comments. Most replies weren't what Karen hoped for. A man named Daryl replied, "Illegal surveillance, Karen. You walked into their house with a key while they weren't home." Another resident, Jennifer, wrote, "This isn't about security. It's about boundaries and power. You crossed the line." One by one, voices that had been silent started typing. Ben watched from his phone at the breakfast table. Alyssa read aloud the best comments like a sportscaster. "You've got fans now," she said. Grinning, Ben smiled faintly. But he wasn't celebrating. "She's going to fight harder now." She did. Karen held an emergency HOA board meeting that afternoon, inviting only select members, those loyal to her. She called it a compliance strategy session. The location wasn't even posted on the HOA board calendar, which was a direct violation of their own transparency rules. Marcus caught wind of it through a contact. "She's circling her wagons," he said over the phone, probably trying to spin this into a witch hunt. "She'll paint you two as hostile." Alyssa wasn't surprised. "She wants the board to bury it." Karen stood at the front of the clubhouse conference room with her clipboard in hand and a rehearsed calm in her voice. "This is not just about the Monroe residents," she told the room. "It's about preventing chaos. If one homeowner gets away with baiting an HOA officer, others will follow." Karen, one of the NOR board members, interrupted. "Is there any truth to the footage going around?" Karen's jaw tightened. "It's been edited. That footage was obtained illegally. I was conducting a safety inspection." Another member leaned forward. "At 2 in the morning, Karen straightened. "Safety doesn't have a clock." Not everyone looked convinced. Back at the Monroe house, Marcus reviewed footage from the internal security setup. One clip showed Karen trying multiple keys before selecting the right one. She also paused at the door, muttered something, and looked back toward the street like she was watching for witnesses. Then clipped that section and sent it to Carla, the retired teacher. 2 hours later, she posted it on the HOA community page with a single sentence. "This isn't a what I'm thing. It happened to me, too." Then, like a crack in glass. Others followed. Ruth, the widow on Maple Grove, said Karen once checked her water pressure unannounced and walked straight into the kitchen without knocking. Alan, a quiet middle-aged vet on Oak Bend, admitted Karen had come into his backyard last year to check for pest control violations. When he wasn't home, Karen's control began slipping. But just as Ben started to feel the tide was turning, another envelope showed up on his doorstep. This time it was from the HOA's legal representative. It accused the Monroes of creating a hostile environment, causing undue stress to a serving official, and violating privacy codes by sharing internal security footage without board clearance. Ben tossed it onto the kitchen counter. Without a word, Alyssa picked it up, read it, then looked at him. "She's not backing down," she said. Ben stared out the window, where Karen's golf cart was now parked one house over. "Good," he said. "Neither are we." Karen never believed she'd be the one on the defensive. For years, she'd ruled Maple Hollow with pristine smiles, printed bylaws, and meetings that ran exactly on schedule. No one questioned her authority until Ben and Alyssa Monroe moved in. Now, everything felt like a test of her control. Her inbox overflowed with messages, some supportive, others scathing. Residents were no longer whispering their frustrations. They were posting them publicly. Even former allies on the board had begun distancing themselves. One by one, the people she'd relied on were going quiet. She wasn't about to let her name go down like this. So she hired legal representation and aggressive HOA specialist attorney from Atlanta named Reed Stetson, known for flipping blame faster than he could read a statute. Reed's strategy was simple: flip the narrative. He drafted cease and desist letters against Ben and Alyssa for public defamation, sent takedown notices to online platforms hosting the doorbell footage, and issued a demand for compensatory damages due to reputational harm. He even included an intimidating clause warning of potential civil consequences for orchestrated entrapment of an HOA executive. The letter arrived on Ben's doorstep 2 days after Carla's viral post. It was hand-delivered by a courier in a suit. Alyssa read it aloud. "They're accusing us of baiting her into committing a crime." Ben didn't flinch. "That's not a defense. That's a confession." Still, Marcus urged caution. "This is where it gets dangerous. Karen's not just angry now, she's losing. And people who are losing make unpredictable moves." The Monroes had support, sure, but they also had growing pressure. Their neighbors were talking, but not all of them were on their side. Some saw them as heroes, others just wanted the drama to stop. One night, their motion camera caught a different neighbor standing at the edge of their lawn, just staring. He didn't say anything, didn't move for almost 2 minutes. Then he walked away. That was the night Ben realized the lines weren't just being drawn, they were sharpening. Karen, meanwhile, made her boldest move yet. She called a press conference, dressed in a pearl sweater and blazer, standing on the steps of the HOA clubhouse. Karen addressed the handful of local reporters who'd caught wind of the suburban scandal. "My actions were taken in good faith," she declared into the mic, "for the safety of our residents. This situation has been twisted by individuals with a clear agenda, people who came to our neighborhood to build a community, but to destroy one." She never said their names, but everyone knew. The press conference might have helped if someone hadn't leaked the internal HOA emails to the neighborhood that same morning. One of those emails showed Karen instructing board members to ignore the Monroe situation publicly, but prepared to document them as repeat violators for future action. Another one detailed her plan to pass a new bylaw, one that would give her exclusive authority to enter properties for safety review. By the end of the day, the press conference had become a punchline. Ben and Alyssa didn't respond in kind. They didn't post online, didn't rant. Instead, they let the silence do the work. But they were preparing. Marcus had pulled city records. Turns out, Karen's personal residence, unlike every other house in the HOA, was technically outside the neighborhood boundary, a loophole grandfathered in years ago, meaning she didn't legally fall under the same HOA rules she was enforcing. Marcus printed the records, stamped them, and handed them to Ben. "She doesn't have the right to any of this," he said. "She's a fraud with a clipboard." Ben looked down at the file in his hands. "Then let's show everyone." That night, they made a choice. They would go to the next HOA general meeting not quietly, not with emails or polite suggestions, but with documents, witnesses, and a motion to have Karen removed. But they weren't the only ones planning a surprise, because while Ben was prepping his speech, Karen was preparing a final act of desperation, one she believed would end the Monroe's credibility once and for all. The general HOA meeting was set for Wednesday evening. Flyers had gone up, emails had been sent, and for once, nearly every house in Maple Hollow was buzzing not with gardening tips or garbage schedules, but with whisper rumors of confrontation. Ben and Alyssa knew this wasn't going to be just another monthly check-in about lawn heights. This was a reckoning. Karen, meanwhile, was unraveling in silence. Her carefully curated image, the charming, real-loving protector of neighborhood order, was collapsing under the weight of her own actions. The footage was out. The leaked emails had hit every inbox. Her own board members had started to look the other way when she entered a room. But Karen wasn't done. She still believed she could win. All she had to do was flip the narrative one more time. To days before the meeting, Ben received a city notice taped to his front door. It cited an anonymous tip that his property was running an unregistered short-term rental. The notice carried a warning. If true, it could violate both HOA regulations and local zoning laws. Ben stared at it for a long moment, confused. They'd never rented their house to anyone. No visitors, no subleases, nothing. "This is her," Alyssa said, eyes narrowing. "She's planting something." It didn't take long to confirm. That night, Marcus sent over footage from the Monroe's outdoor security cams. At 3:12 a.m., Karen's golf cart had rolled up silently. She'd stepped onto their porch, pulled a folded piece of paper from her jacket, and slid it under the mat right before making a phone call that lasted exactly 3 minutes. The timestamp matched the tip line to city code enforcement. She wasn't just accusing them. She was building fake evidence. Ben's hands trembled with rage. "She's trying to frame us." Marcus nodded. "And we're going to let her try." They gathered the recordings, cross-referenced the call logs, and even pulled weather reports to match Karen's clothing to the night's temperature. Everything was aligning. The pieces weren't just falling into place, they were clicking like a lock turning. By the day of the meeting, the clubhouse parking lot was full. People who hadn't shown up to HOA functions in years were sitting in plastic folding chairs, arms crossed, waiting. The energy in the room felt combustibly. Karen entered 15 minutes late, clutching her binder like it was armor. She scanned the room, smiled tightly, and made her way to the front. "Thank you for coming," she began, tapping the mic. "There's been a lot of misinformation floating around, videos, edited footage, and accusations, most of which are being handled by legal counsel. But today's meeting is about restoring order." Ben stood, and so did half the room. Karen paused, eyes flicking across the crowd. "This isn't just about rules anymore," Ben said calmly. "It's about trust, about the people who live here being able to close their doors at night and not worry who might let themselves in." Karen's voice was thin. "Mr. Monroe, you're out of order." Ben raised a folder. "This is the report showing your residence sits outside the HOA's legal boundary. You've been enforcing rules you're not subject to." Gasps scattered across the room. Another neighbor, Carla, stood up behind Ben. "This is about all of us. She walked into my house. She claimed it was a safety check and left the garage open." Karen's eyes darted for the board president, only to remember she was the board president. One by one, neighbors began to speak, not in anger but in quiet, factual recall. Each incident, each overreach, each lock touched without permission. But Karen still had one card left. She opened her binder and pulled out a printed document. "This," she said, "is a signed statement from a Maple Hollow resident claiming the Monroes are operating an illegal short-term rental under the table. That's a zoning violation. Grounds for forced removal." The room shifted. Ben looked up, calm. "That's funny, because I have video of you placing that note yourself and making the call to the city. Want to watch it together?" He handed a USB drive to the board's vice president. The projector flickered. Karen took a slow step back, because what came next would strip her defenses away in front of everyone, and she knew it. Detective Ray Norris stood in the middle of Jake Morgan's living room, arms folded, eyes trained on the old brass doorknob, the broken lock, the prints on the knob, and the scuffed mud trail across the floor painted a story that Karen Prescott hadn't accounted for. Jake had called Ray to nights prior right after the incident, calm, but clearly rattled. He hadn't told Ray everything then, just enough to get him to agree to a favor. The rest, Jake held that back, on purpose. Ray's presence now wasn't part of any formal police report. Not yet. But he was here, in uniform, and not just for show. Jake had used his one favor, something they'd sworn would only be cashed and if it really mattered. And this mattered. Across the street, Karen paced her porch like a caged tiger. Her expensive flats clicked against the concrete with frantic rhythm. Something was off, and she knew it. She'd seen Ray arrive earlier that morning with a marked cruiser and two silent patrolmen. That wasn't HOA business. That was real. Back inside, Jake stared at the broken frame of his front door. He was tired, not just physically, but of constantly playing defense in a game he never signed up for. Karen's obsession with control had gone too far. She had entered his home illegally. But worse than that, she'd done it confidently, as though the rules bent for her. Jake opened his laptop and played the footage again. The security cam had caught her face clearly. Karen, key in hand, eyes scanning the yard like she was checking for neighborhood gossips, then slipping inside like she owned the place. Ray exhaled through his nose. "She's not even subtle." Jake shrugged. She didn't think she had to be. Outside, another neighbor, a quiet woman named Teresa, peeked through her blinds. She'd seen Karen enter that day, but she hadn't said a word until now. As the officers moved through the house gathering statements and photographing evidence, Jake's phone lit up. A message from Teresa. "I didn't know it was that serious. I'll talk. I saw her going. She had no idea you'd set her up." Jake smirked. Ray caught the look. "You sure you want to go through with this?" Jake nodded. "She's crossed the line for the last time." Ray moved to the door, paused, and glanced back. "Then you'll want to be here when we bring her in." Minutes later, two officers walked across the street with calm authority. Karen froze mid-step. She tried to smooth her blouse and smile, like they were here to ask her about a permit. But Ray walked behind them, holding a printout. Karen Prescott. One officer said, "Yes, we need to speak with you about an incident involving unlawful entry and property tampering." Karen blinked. "Excuse me, that's absurd. I'm the HOA president. I was just checking on things." Ray handed her the photo. A still from the footage. Her face, her hand on the doorknob, her foot crossing Jake's threshold. Her smirk cracked. "That door wasn't yours to open," Ray said quietly. "And we've got 3 angles that confirm you used a key that doesn't belong to you." Karen's voice was shrill now. "That's not illegal. I had authority." "He's under HOA scrutiny." Ray leaned in. "Our rules don't overrule state law." The neighbors gathered. Phones appeared. Someone across the street whispered, "She's finally getting it." Karen was still protesting when the officers read her the formal warning. No cuffs yet, but Jake knew that wasn't the end. This was the beginning of the end game. Jake stepped onto his porch. He didn't say anything, just watched. Karen's gaze locked with his. He raised one eyebrow. She knew it was over. The perfect little world she thought she controlled was cracking, and the one person she tried to corner had flipped the entire board. And what Karen didn't realize yet was that the key she used, it wasn't hers. Jake had planted it. The real twist. He knew she'd take the bait. The atmosphere in the room was electric. The tension that had been building for weeks now hung like a thundercloud above Karen Prescott's head. Inside Greg and Vanessa's living room, the officers stood calm and collected, reviewing body cam footage, printed HOA logs, and the newly uncovered email thread that had been forwarded anonymously to Vanessa earlier that morning. Karen's eyes flicked between each officer and the screen where her emails were now being shown. She tried to spin it, insisting that she was just doing her duty as HOA president and protecting the community. But the more she spoke, the more tangled her story became. She hadn't counted on Officer Delaney knowing Greg personally or knowing the law better than she did. Just 3 minutes into her flustered explanations, Officer Delaney turned to Karen and said, "Ma'am, what you did constitutes unlawful entry. This isn't about HOA authority. This is a criminal matter now." Greg leaned back slightly in his chair. He didn't have to say anything. The evidence spoke for itself. Karen had used a master HOA key intended only for emergency maintenance to enter their property, rifle through Vanessa's desk drawers, and take photos of personal mail and property documents. What she didn't know was that Vanessa had recently installed a hidden mini camera inside a decorative vase on the hallway table. Every second of her illegal entry had been recorded, and the audio included her muttering insults under her breath. The officers asked Karen if she would like to make a formal statement. She declined. Her mouth was dry, and the facade she had built over years of petty power was crumbling in front of her. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, the HOA's vice president, Linda Morales, stepped through the front door. She had received an urgent call from Vanessa earlier and came to support them. But she wasn't alone. She brought a thick folder of HOA financial records and a USB drive. "What's this?" asked Officer Delaney. Linda placed the folder down and quietly said, "Evidence that Karen's been using HOA funds to hire private investigators to watch residents she doesn't like." Greg and Vanessa weren't the first ones. Greg blinked. Even he wasn't expecting that. Vanessa whispered, "You're kidding." "No," Linda said. "She paid for a surveillance company using the HOA credit card. I warned her it was illegal, but she claimed it was for security upgrades." Karen's face turned pale. She knew that Linda had access to every receipt and transaction in the HOA database. And now it was all being laid bare. Within the hour, Karen was issued a citation for unlawful entry and misuse of community funds pending further investigation. She wasn't arrested on the spot, but she was escorted out of the house and told not to return to any HOA board functions until further notice. Greg, watching her leave, finally allowed himself to breathe fully. The monster who had tormented them with fines, threats, and false accusations was finally exposed. But it didn't stop there. A week later, at a special horror emergency meeting recorded and broadcast for community transparency, Greg shared her message to the entire neighborhood. He played clips from Karen's unauthorized entry, showed the receipts from the surveillance company, and finished with a call for change. We don't need a bully patrolling our homes. We need leadership with integrity. That's why I'm officially announcing my candidacy to replace Karen on the board. The room erupted in cheers. Neighbors who had once been too afraid to speak were now openly applauding Greg and Vanessa. Karen, on the other hand, remained inside her house, her blinds drawn, watching the world she once ruled move on without her. Her reputation was shattered. The power she clung to so tightly had been her undoing. As for Greg and Vanessa, they turned their home into a symbol of what could be achieved when ordinary people stood up against abuse of authority. And as Officer Delaney put it best, the night he left their home, you waited patiently, gathered your evidence, and let justice speak. That's how you win, not by force, but by truth. End of story.